All right. Well, thanks to Randy Merkel for making contact with Laura Sweany here. And Laura's going to talk about Quince. I love the title. What was the title? Quince, the wonder fruit from antiquity, or
Something like that.
Yeah.
Fruit of the gods.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Quince charming.
Oh, charming. Oh, lovely. I hadn't thought about that.
You would.
Yeah.
You would. Yeah, so I hand this over to Laura, and
All right.
thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
So you want to,
Let's see, how do we get thinking back in? I'll do it. Yeah, please. I'm not a real tech savvy person, so,
okay.
and this, the PowerPoint isn't really fancy. It's just kind of to make sure that we don't forget to talk about anything, because I sort of put things in categories. And in situations like this, where we have a nice small group and everybody's really right here, I would prefer if we don't stand on ceremony. If you have questions, ask them. Don't need to hold your questions till the end or any of that nonsense. We're just all going to talk about what we know about Quince, what the questions that we have about them, and have a conversation, really, more than anything else. That's what I hope that we can do together.
Okay.
So I worked for Rain Tree Nursery, and I've also worked for Burnt Ridge Nursery. And I've been just a huge food nerd and plant geek for 20+ years. And there are certain kinds of plants that really fascinate me, because they have tremendous historical value. And I love that. I love feeling like I'm having an experience with history when I am working with a particular kind of fruit. I have this similar experience with medlars, something that is unique and kind of mysterious. And how do you use them? How do you cook them? How do you get into them? What do they tell me about how people used to live? What have we lost by losing touch with some of these really neat plants and wonderful fruit? And so that's kind of what I want to bring to our conversation today. And also, how do you cultivate it? Is it hard to grow? Is it easy to grow? What are the varieties that you might want to grow? What would do well here? So that, we can walk away with some practical experience about how to grow it and how to eat it. So that's what I'm about tonight. And next, there we go. Okay, so, wait, I'll fix that. Okay, so let's start a bit about the history of quince. Quince is one of the oldest tree fruits in cultivation. It really comes kind of from the Middle East, that whole crescent area, what we would call Eastern Europe, and what used to be called Asia, not Southeast Asia, but what we would now call Eastern Asia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Syria, Turkey, all these, places around the Mediterranean. That's really where we see quince, at least the tree fruit quince, emerging from history. Quince was huge among early American colonists, mostly because of its gel properties for pectin that would allow things, that would give things texture. People back in the old days used to do everything they could think of to give kind of plain food something different, and so that you didn't have food fatigue. And quince, not only did it store really well, but it gave other kinds of foods different sorts of textures. And this goes back to before biblical times, knowing about quince. The Garden of Eden apple most certainly was a quince. I mean, there are a lot of fruit that claim that, but really, probably quince is the actual one. The Latin name Cydonia oblonga is derived from the city of Cydonia on the island of Crete.
Been there.
Yeah, oh wow, nice. So quince recipes have been found throughout all kinds of ancient writings. Nostradamus got really pissed off that people would peel quince before they cooked with it and served it, because he thought much of the flavor in quince was in the peel. So, I mean, you find references all over the place. And the fruit in historical context is very regularly associated with fertility. Quince was often given as a wedding gift to brides to ensure fertility. Quince foods and the fruits was often given during the introduction of children after childbirth. And quince is a really powerful nutritive food. So in many cases, the Chinese will cook things that contain properties that increase the health of somebody in a particular situation. So the gift of the food addresses a nutrition deficit that people in that situation might experience. So having quince foods for women who've just given birth is a great way to get their bowels going because of the fiber and the antioxidant properties, make them strengthen themselves and their milk really good and nutritious. I mean, there's so many reasons why quince would be good for people who are ailing. So that's one of the things I notice when I do historical dives into foods is what do they do, you know? And quince does a lot. So we'll continue to look for the rest of our slideshow here.
Right, trying to figure out, can we do a side by side with this?
Oh, you do
what's on
share
the
screen. Do a share screen.
There we go. There we go. There we go.
Anybody have any questions on the historical context of quince?
Why do you think it's become not as popular?
Good question.
First.
Yeah,
First
and that was
everyone
the
loved.
next thing I was gonna say, you read my mind. I believe that the beginning of the end of quince as a modern fruit was in about 1890, when the Knox family introduced powdered gelatin. Yes. And so people no longer needed to save the cores and the seeds of the quince fruit and put it in a jelly bag and stick it in their jams and jellies and whatnot to preserve, just to, use its gelling properties. And after that time, people just kind of lost interest in it. Luther Burbank thought he would re-energize quince in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was, all about feeding the world with the scientific introduction of improved varieties of things. And so Burbank was responsible for pineapple quince and Smyrna, I believe. Those are two varieties that he introduced. Pineapple is uniquely disease resistant. And for people in parts of the country that have a lot of fire blight pressure, as well as Pseudomonas, which it can be susceptible to. We have Pseudomonas out here, but it doesn't usually affect quinces. We have very little bits of fire blight. And so we don't normally have to worry about that. But, on the East Coast, that can be a big deal. So pineapple really is the most disease resistant of all of the modern varieties.
No, excuse me.
You're lost.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Again, this is a brand new baby.
Child by air.
Yeah. So do you have it up on your screen? Should be.
So you had to cook X to get rid of raw.
Okay.
There are some quinces you can eat raw. And really, that is about, does it get ripe enough? While we don't have a lot of diseases that hit our quince trees, we also don't live in a really hot, long summer climate. And I have had circumstances where the summers were not quite warm enough to even fully ripen the easy to ripen quinces. There's kind of two categories of quince varieties. There's the really heat loving varieties that come from Portugal and from Turkey that need a lot of heat to fully ripen and will tolerate a lot of heat. And I recommend those for people who live in really hot climates. And then there's the Russian strain of quince varieties like yes. Right, and they don't take as much heat to ripen. And you can really tell when they're ripe because they smell. They smell glorious. They smell like fruits and flowers and honey and lemons and just like, wow, this just unbelievable aroma that lasts and lasts. I usually put a couple in my car so that they warm up and the smell just permeates my car. They used to get used as pomanders in the Middle Ages. They would be pricked with sticks and put cloves in them, and then they would be hung in closets to scent the clothes and to, you know, counteract all of the smell of the Middle Ages. But you know, their smell is something I don't think I've had an experience of in any other kind of fruit, really. And that's how you know it's right. And there are some times when we get to the end of the summer, quinces still don't smell yet. I know they're not completely ripe, but they're as good as I'm gonna get, and they still taste okay. But they never get enough heat units to soften in our region. There are a couple of varieties called, like there's one from Peru called Carp's Sweet that will soften if it gets enough heat. But you know, so it doesn't get soft, no big deal. Some people still eat it raw in very thin slices.
Wow.
Sometimes it will go on like cheese platters because it has a very strong citrusy, firm,
Do you do?
kind of a lemon or pineapple component to it, but it's not something you want to eat a lot of all at once. It's very fibrous in its texture when it's uncooked and exceedingly strong flavored. You find a lot of people add it to things like apple pie to add a little bit more oomph to the flavor. And add a little bit more body, sure, yeah. So that's, you know, where most people are familiar with quince these days is in the Spanish delicacy membrillo. And membrillo, yeah, no worries, is a paste. It's a quince paste that is eaten along with like manchego cheese that's really strong and you know, kind of funky, and you want something that pairs with that, stands up to that, along with a nice piece of bread or whatnot. And so that membrillo, which speaks to the softness of quince twigs when they first grow, they're very fragile and kind of gentle wood. And it reminded the Spaniards of willow wood. And membrillo means little willow. So, you know, I've tried to make membrillo. It is surprisingly difficult to make. I've failed wonderfully twice, but you know, if you get the hang of it, a lot of people would enjoy that. Now, because it is a thick, heavy meat, if you start cooking with it, then what you notice is that it lends itself to paste. And so membrio, of course, was the obvious solution, but fruit leather is another great solution. And I also really like to just bake them and then heat them up and can it just as paste, unsweetened paste,
So what kind of quince are you growing that you do this with?
any of them.
Okay,
Literally, you can do this with any of them. And then I do it in little half-pint jars. And I add it to spaghetti sauces and curries, anything where I want something that's gonna thicken things up and add a little bit of a base flavor that's strong and a little sweet. You know, it's, wow, just livens everything up. The other way that most people will prepare quince is to poach it. And poach it in wine, poach it in sugar syrup, and it turns this beautiful rose color. And yeah, and then you can have it in a compote, or you can stew other things with it, sort of ice cream or bread pudding or oatmeal or whatever. So that's another really nice way to use it. And one of the things that makes quince really easy to use is the fact that it stores really brilliantly. It is very, yeah, it's one of those things that you can put, you know, bins of it on your back porch and they'll be good for months. They'll start to go bad on one end and you just cut that part off and eat the rest of it and you're good to go. They're just super easy to work with. Fruits.
Would be good in a root cellar.
Would be good in a root cellar. You don't even have to have a root cellar. Literally, you just have to have a protected place outside where the mice don't get into it and you're good to go. Now, the backside of the fact that it's a really firm, fibrous, durable fruit is that it's really hard to cut. And so you kind of gotta figure out your particular comfort level in how you work with the raw fruit. I mean, like you kind of do it, a sharp knife and go slow. What I normally do is I take the fruit and I take a really nice sharp knife and I put a cloth over it. And I very gently cut the fruit in half, or as close to half as I can get, and then I bake it. And I don't core it unless I want to save the cores for, you know, using as gelatin pectin, or I want to save the seeds for teeth or sore throats. Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. And if you just put the whole thing in, cores and all, into the oven, and you know, it's gonna smell heavenly, it's gonna take about 45 minutes to bake. And then when you take it out, I just you've got a hard kind of skin where the opening of the fruit is. And I just sort of gently use a dull paring knife and I go around the core and I pull that harder skin off. I give it to the chickens or whatever. And then I can just gently pull the core out. And then I have this nice, soft, luscious blob of fruit that then I can do whatever I want to with it. I can make a sauce, I can add it to something, you know, but it's soft. I can freeze it. I can put it in the fridge in a container and I can eat on pre-cooked, pre-baked pieces of quince for a week. You know, I get a little sweet tooth, I just go in, take one of those quinces out, munch on it, and man, I am satisfied. It's just, wow, so nice. So when it comes to medicinal properties of quince, like I was mentioning, the Greeks found out, and as well as did the Chinese, that the mucilaginous quality of quince, that thickening, makes it really good for sore throats.
Wow, we got it, but I can't marry it. Is it on your computer?
Video?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, Zoom, go back to Zoom.
But,
To
you know,
go-
I did them slow. So I just
Ah.
put them in half
Yeah,
and I put them in some water.
Yes.
Slow cook it.
uh-huh,
And then just the core just comes right out.
Yep.
You've got all the pectin water.
Yep.
In there. So it
Nice.
works really well.
and I think you could put wine in there, or you could
Yeah.
put maple syrup in there, a little bit honey with the water, add another kind of fragrance to it.
Yeah, I take off the leftover water to make jelly.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the pulp makes a really nice base for jams or adds a different thing. to it.
Yeah,
So it works really well.
Yeah.
And you get all those lovely scents. It really is lovely.
it is, yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
That's a great, yeah, that's a great strategy.
it's great because you don't have to wash it or, you know.
Mhm. And I'm sure for those of you who have instant pots, you could do the same thing.
Yes.
You
So
know,
there's a slow cooker function.
on the Instapot, right? Yes.
Multi-purpose tool.
Yeah. So that would absolutely be another really great way to use it.
Oh, it's great, especially if you want to make jelly,
Yeah, yeah. I
because
can
you really
imagine.
get all the pectin in that way.
Yeah.
And if you need it for another kind of jelly fruit,
Mhm.
whatever you're making, you just have the basis there, so,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I go through and I do take a few cores and I dry them on the windowsill or in the dehydrator if I'm dehydrating something else. And then I just stick it in a plastic or in a glass jar, a little desiccant packet. And so whenever I'm feeling a little punky and my throat is sore or whatever, high in vitamin C, antioxidants, all of the good things that you want fruit to do for you, it does those things. And, and it's not sugar bomb.
Yeah.
So that's a boon for those of us who have to watch our blood sugar levels. So now let's talk about growing this plant. There are 3 different kinds of what we call quince. There are trees that are grafted and they have trunks and they're a big-headed style of tree. They're not a particularly tall tree, and they tend to have a very round crown, and they are tip bearers. So it's, yes, as far as I know, yeah. And so you want to be careful when you're pruning them to encourage a lot of nice twiggy growth. And don't get too crazy about, getting a really beautiful open aesthetic form, because you'll pull off a lot of the tips of the branches that would be giving you fruit. They're extraordinarily low maintenance trees, especially for us here in the Pacific Northwest. They don't tend to have problems with fungal infections, so they tolerate our wet springs really nicely. You're laughing, huh?
Yeah,
That means you.
Yeah. yeah, well, I've had problems with, hair trellis rust.
Yes, this pears and quinces are closer together than anything else. Quince is closer to pear than it is to apple, say for example, although they're both palms. And we see this because quince rootstock gets used a lot with pears. And Provence quince is a type of rootstock that gets used with pears to dwarf, semi-dwarf pears. And it's a pretty reliable, pairing. And conversely, there are a fair amount of quince varieties that are not compatible with Provence quince rootstock. You end up with delayed graft rejection. And so what some people will do, if all you have is a quince rootstock, is they'll graft the quince onto the Provence and then they'll bury the graft, knowing it's going to fail. But then knowing that the top will send out its own roots and will grow on its own roots. Is there anybody who needs to know how to do that safely?
Not how to do what?
How to bury a graft?
Yes.
Okay, so you dig a hole, like a trench, that is where you're taking the graft and you're putting it about 12 inches below the soil line. And you have this bowl that you have planted the tree into. And you let it grow for about 2 years. So it gets settled into its place and it's got a decent root system going. And then you bury the graft and you fill the hole back back to the regular soil level. And what'll happen is because the tree already has an established root system, you're not gonna have problems with it rotting. But it will eventually start to degrade. And when that happens, then the quince part will start to send out roots because now it's in contact with the soil in ways that a grafted plant is not, the scion is not normally in contact with the soil. That is the safest way that I know of to bury a graft and get a tree to go on its own roots. So oddly enough, although you see a lot of pears on quince rootstocks regularly, you also see quince on pear rootstocks. So the OHF series of rootstocks, the 333, the 87, the 97, you regularly see quince on those. And because you don't have the kind of graft rejection problems that you do on Provence. So it's interesting if you have pears at home and you start to see suckering from the base, very often, if you look at the leaves, you can tell it's not pear, it's quince. Because quince has big coin-shaped leaves that are a little felty on the back side. They don't look anything like pear leaves, which are lanceolate and they're shiny, usually on the top. They look totally different. So, yes.
So on the quince that I have that had for several years, it has always had suckers coming up. So that's from the pear graft.
Could be. Have you identified the fact that it's not quince
really
leaves?
haven't, but
Yeah.
there'll probably be some on there now.
Yeah.
Because, but every, I usually trim,
Uh-huh.
that's what you do.
Some just sucker more than others, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting because I get suckers for mine too, and I thought I was getting, the quince had dropped and it was growing.
Yeah.
So I dug down and it was coming off the roots.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Did
but
you
it
ever
was quince.
compare the leaves?
Oh, yeah, it was quince.
It was quince.
It was quince on quince.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there are some varieties you can do that. You can do quince onto a Provence, but it's not, but you really kind of have to go down that rabbit hole of.
Yeah,
Graft.
actually, I don't know. I mean, I bought the tree and they never said what the rootstock was, so it could have been something else because the other thing that I've done is grown quince from seed. And if you can get it to survive for a couple of years, it makes a perfectly good rootstock. In fact, some of the ones that I had were really nice dwarfs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. And then I just grafted other ones onto that were
Yeah.
named varieties. But I mean, do they really have a lot of variation in taste?
I haven't found that to be true.
Yeah, I haven't
But
either.
then we have such a
Limited palate.
limited, growing. We can't really grow them out into the fullness of their flavor. So,
But the Russian ones, because they're growing in Russia, so
Yeah.
they should have the full flavor, don't you
you
think?
think so?
Yeah,
I just haven't noticed that much difference.
no,
I
haven't
noticed
either.
differences in, where I notice differences is in the size of the fruit. Some trees, like Portugal quince, tends to make monstrously large fruit. Oh my gosh, it's huge. Orange quince tends to be round. The Van Diemen tends to set small fruit that's really pear shaped, and a lot of it. So it's not so much in the flavor that I notice, but it's the amount of fruit that is set on the tree, the shape of the fruit that is set on the tree. And that's about it, that I noticed.
Although I have to admit, I had one in California that was absolutely to die for.
Yeah.
And it was the most amazing quince I've ever had, and I've never had another one like that.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it was at the farmer's market. And it was-
Yeah, it's lucky when you can find somebody at a farmer's market that has quince. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yeah. The other thing, I don't know, for those of you who haven't actually seen quince fruit, it's fuzzy. The fruit is fuzzy. It has this nap, this velvet on it. And most people will wash it, take the velvet off before they do anything, and you don't have to, would make Nostradamus mad, maybe, I don't know. But, I don't even bother to do that. I just use them.
It didn't say anything about the forest.
right?
Yeah.
All right, so make sure, let's see, we've talked, here we got the cultivation slide. So,
A question on, if you grew it at a greenhouse here, do you think you could get it right?
oh,
Like
for
right,
sure, for sure. Yeah, right, for sure, yes.
Then you have to dwarf, probably got a 12 foot.
Yeah, I mean, I would personally save my greenhouse for Pluot, but hey, it takes all kinds to make a garden club.
Yep.
And,
Oh, wait, can you grow your pluots in the greenhouse?
oh, sure, yeah, it's about the only place I would be able to get them to ripen,
Cool.
but anyway. Don't get me started.
I would like to actually.
So,
I see another.
yeah. They tend to be extremely productive. And to the point where you really have to watch the fruit setting in the early years of the plants. I have killed young quince plants by being so excited that I was getting so much fruit and it killed the plant more than once.
These are ones.
I know, right? I'm just so greedy. But I don't do that anymore. So yeah, watch your fruit set on the first couple of years. They just are very precocious. I think some have more tendencies towards biennial bearing patterns than others. So yeah, just watch that. And we talked about the rootstocks and, oh, right, we were talking about the 3 different types. There's the tree quince that we're spending most of our time today talking about. Then there is the flowering quince, which is a totally different Latin family species, and they're small, low growing, usually thorny, and they will make little tiny fruits that don't really have the same smell. You could eat them, but they're just like mostly seed and skin. I found them to be super awesome. And then there's what they call Chinese quince. And Chinese quince tends to be a suckering shrub that can make monstrously large oval fruit. It's not usually grafted. It needs a pollinizer. So thankfully, they're usually sold as seedlings. And so you just need to get 2. For your hedgerow, oh my goodness, Chinese quince would be the bomb. Because they're large, rangy, bushy things.
But not evergreen.
They are not evergreen, but they are so twiggy
Uh-huh,
that they, would
Screen.
still function as a screen.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but how big do they grow? How tall?
They'll get 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're big plants.
Does rain tree sell?
We do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
I don't think I've ever seen one.
Yeah, they're neat. And, but I don't know that the fruit actually ripens enough to eat here. We have a couple of them at the Rain Tree Nursery, and I have pulled a few fruit off and set it on my counter, in October, November. And it went bad before it actually smelled like anything. So I can't, give you a for sure about whether it gets to an edible point or not. But it would be a fun one to kind of play with, because it's, as most quince is, beautiful flowers. The little flowering quinces and the Chinese quince have quite colorful, small flowers that are born in clusters. And there's even a contorted Chinese quince, which is a wild thing. But the tree quinces have what looks kind of like apple blossoms on steroids. They're larger than your typical apple blossom, and they're single because they're born on the tips of the branches and not fruiting spurs. And they're lovely. They tend to have a pretty graceful form even when they're not in leaf. And then of course you get the fruit that smells so heavenly. And then in fall, let's see, how do we go to the next? Lovely, okay. Yeah, we're down at the bottom here now. You've got the spring flowers, you've got the fruits in the fall, and then there's beautiful golden leaf color in the fall, just clear yellow. And
So what would be the difference between the flowering quince and the Chinese quince?
Chinese quince is considerably larger,
Uh-huh,
big, tall, big fat bush. The flowering quince tends to be a little mounding.
right.
If it gets to 3 feet, you're lucky.
They can get huge.
Can it?
Oh, yeah. We've had big ones, but they're not really related, are they?
No.
They're different.
Yeah, they're different.
Yeah.
Oh, I take that back. I have seen
No. And they're-
flowering quince. Usually it's a coral red
Yes,
in
it's
the
coral
bloom, although I've seen them in kind of a white with pink, and I've seen them in red.
Right.
And
They're usually
they sucker when they're really, really happy. They
They're
can
just-
sucker.
Yeah,
And
and
form a
keep going,
thicket.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
right.
you're talking about the flowering.
The flowering quince.
The Japanese flowering.
Yes,
Yeah,
right. Canamelis, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Right, orange,
You can eat
red.
the fruit
So
of
how big
those.
do the, how big do the tree quince
They
get?
do,
the tree quince,
very infrequent.
10 feet.
I thought I've seen them a lot bigger, but maybe I just dreamt it.
No, I've never
Really?
seen really big, tall quince. But I haven't seen everything there is in the world to see, so.
I don't know.
So this is kind of an example of the fall color. You can see it's just a kind of a clear yellow to the leaf. Not a lot of red or orange or anything like that.
10 feet across, and then first of the
And there is the
Yeah.
bloom in the spring, nice, lovely cup-shaped yellow of white. Blossoms that will age to a very soft pink, kind of a dusky rose in some varieties more than others. And of course, there's the fruit on a very nice productive tree. Yeah, right? And boy, I probably would thin that.
So those should have been thinned.
Thinned, I would have thinned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unless that was a really old tree that just does that regularly every year, I wouldn't risk letting it set like that.
Similar thinning to apples and pears,
Yep.
like 1 every 6 inches or something on.
Yep.
a branch kind of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably even do 1 every 4 inches,
Mhm.
because, they just set a lot of fruit, so. And that's how I tell, this is 4 inches from knuckle, edge of knuckle to edge of knuckle, hang loose is 6 inches, that's how I make the differential between tight spacing and wider spacing when I'm thinning.
I think you can just touch this.
Okay. This is great, I like this part right here,
Okay.
fantastic. Okay, so now we're back in the culinary, I wanna make sure we caught everything we wanted to see. Dramatic, yeah, shredding. Another thing that I've done, and I've liked it quite a bit, is a Portuguese liqueur called ratafia. And ratafia is where you take a clear alcohol like vodka and you shred the raw quince and you macerate it in the vodka for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like limoncello
Yes.
when you're done. It's very lemony and pineapple-y and sharp and wonderful. You can add, sugar to it if you want to sweeten it up a little bit. And they also will add spices to it. So you can add some mace and some ginger and, my God.
Did you bring some?
I think it both ways, so I can experience the full ratafia experience. And it was just in the fall, you could add it to cider, you could just have a little hot toddy of it. It's so good. And good for me, I felt on the whole that because of the nutritive value of the quince, I was probably pulling out some of that into, I was gonna dissolve in the alcohol, I didn't feel too bad about that. But yeah, very nice, and use it like apples, stores really well, I think we got all of that. And medicinal uses, we talked about the pomanders, we talked about the tea for sore throat. The Chinese use it to treat cough. Powdered quince is really good for your digestive tract and for diarrhea, again, because I think of the mucilaginous quality. It tends to coat the digestive system and firm things up.
How do you powder quince?
Well, I would dry it. I would slice it
And dry it?
and dry it,
And
or
grind
you take the paste and dry it in a dehydrator and then grind it up in a coffee grinder. Yeah,
Yeah,
And then you can have, that's your pectin. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
how
you
you
can do
store it.
that too, for
Well,
sure.
you know, I've always noticed a whole lot of pectin is in the seeds.
I didn't hear that. I was just reading an article, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, I usually use the seeds and the capsule, the seed capsule,
yeah,
when I wanna do the whole pectin.
yeah,
thing.
deal, because if you actually cut the quince in half
Mhm.
and look at the core, you'll see this mucilaginous thing around the seeds.
Around the seed.
And that's the pectin, or part of the pectin. I mean, I'm
But
sure
I
there's,
don't think you want the seed because of the, I don't know about the cyanide and.
Well, you can't eat the seed.
No, but.
yeah,
But.
no, you can cook it.
Yeah, you can certainly cook it. I mean,
Yeah.
and the Greeks value the seeds. They don't talk about saving the capsule. They just talk about saving the seeds to make into a tea for sore throats.
And I'm sure you're drying that mucilaginous stuff when you do the seeds, and then you get that in a dry form. So
Could be,
I'm pretty sure that's what you're taking for sore throat.
yeah,
Yeah.
could be, for sure. But yes, to go back, it's antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, anti-ulcerative. And iron, fiber, vitamins, and minerals, gotta love that. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah,
So backtracking, when you said you grew some from seed,
Mhm.
so why wouldn't you just keep growing it? Why would you graft to?
Oh, you know,
mean,
it was, yeah, you can, I did, actually. So I wasn't getting a lot of fruit production, and so I grafted, another variety, a known variety onto it.
Mm.
And I checked to see, and as I said, they all sort of taste the same.
Oh.
So I'm not so sure, except for the fact that the Russian ones seem to be really acclimated to this area, that I would say that it doesn't really matter what you grow so much. But you want something that produces, and the branch that I grafted produced a lot more than the other part of the one that I grew from seed. But they grow really easily from seed. They're kind of amazing. Yeah,
yeah, what I hear is they're not true from
No.
seed, but the value of taking a scion from a selected variety is almost always either
right.
volume of fruit or size of fruit. Yeah.
And it was really funny because I had a couple of these things that I grew from seed and they were different sizes. But I love the one that's really small. It's just tiny and it stayed really tiny. So my grafted quince are of nice size. They're not huge, but they're not small. And they're very, it's so productive. It's just amazing. I always have more than I ever need. But the ones that I grew from seed are probably a lot more unpredictable, but they make great rootstock because they're acclimated. You know that they'll
Yeah.
grow. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So if you have any, I mean, I don't like to use Quince Provence because I think where I live is just a little too cold. And it seems to cause them to die. So I tried to do the dwarf pears. And most of my Quince Provence didn't do very well. Other people I know, it does just fine. So I'm just thinking it's the climate
Yeah.
that I'm in, but the seeds from the quince are just fine. So, you know, it all depends where you live and your soil and all those kind of
Yeah.
combinations, but I'm sure most people would do just fine, but for me, that was what worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you able to ripen the quince if it doesn't get fully ripe on the tree? Because I've noticed some years, this is before I had my own quince, and you give me some.
Yeah,
Some years it's a lot more aromatic than others.
and I think it takes that heat, but also knowing when to pick it. So I may have been picking them too early or earlier on, but now I wait until they're nice and golden yellow and you can actually smell them. when
Smell,
they're-
yeah, the
Yeah,
smell, oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah,
Yeah, I would put them on the front porch and just, or the, you know, inside they didn't last as long,
right,
but just to smell them when I walk by.
yeah.
Beautiful.
It's just heady.
It is, and so. So you can't, they won't really ripen on their own after they're picked,
I haven't noticed that.
okay.
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, that one, the couple of the Chinese quince that I had on my counter, they didn't change. They never got beautiful and fragrant. And they didn't change in softness or in color.
So no, yeah,
So I don't think so. I
Okay.
don't think they ripen off the tree, similar to like Asian pears.
okay.
Would you stuck them in a brown bag with the banana?
Yeah. Or an apple. Right.
And,
It
yeah.
would be something you could try. I have not tried
Experiment
that.
away.
I don't know.
I'll be happy to supply a few for you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, one more question. I mean, when they're flowering, they don't have, it's not the same scent as when the fruit is.
No.
So we've talked a lot about how wonderful they smell.
Yes.
Do you know that is that whatever you call it, essence ever used in perfume? Is it one of the things that perfume people use because we're all wild about it?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And I just
Well, you-
wonder, I mean,
Yeah.
some,
So maybe.
You know, there was a book called Totally Quince, which Patrice suggested I bring, but I didn't bring. Yeah, I rushed out of the house.
totally quince.
Totally Quince, and it's, she said that, or, no, actually, it's by Saving the Seasons book that has it, where they used to use them to perfume your laundry.
Right, I can see that.
Yeah, but I have never actually heard of them as a,
The thing is, the smell that perfumey smell is not really found in the cooked fruits.
No, it's not that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
So
It's probably in
it'd be
the.
hard to distill that.
And they're very dry,
Yeah.
They are.
which is one of the reasons why they last as long as they do.
Right.
And why you could stick one, you know,
Good
make a foam
question.
ender out of it. Because
Yeah.
it will dry and desiccate before it starts to drop or rot.
but
Yeah,
what
there's
about
not any
the,
oil you
alcohol?
could express
No,
out of it.
Not really.
well, I wouldn't think so, but what about the alcohol? Does it have a scent?
You should be just.
Not as much, not
Uh-huh.
nearly as much. It doesn't capture that
It must be
crazy
very,
top note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just more lemony and
Yeah.
pineapple-y and not that lovely fragrance. Yeah,
it must be,
that's really interesting.
It's-
I'm now
it's-
gonna have to start
it's
researching
really
that.
yeah,
Good question.
yeah,
Anybody
I
else?
could get a still, distill my own perfumes.
yes.
But you gotta be able to, you gotta be able to capture in a bag and mist it with alcohol.
Yeah, it would be interesting to
You
see,
know,
what
some
you get out of a
old
distilling
day
process,
quince.
really.
Yeah,
That's an
it
interesting
would, it
idea.
would be interesting.
Yeah,
A perfumer could probably
Question.
figure it out.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
The folks that are growing quince, do you tend to have them as a single trunk or more of a bush, like a hazelnut?
Not a tree.
They,
No,
yeah,
it's a
tree, for
tree.
sure.
Because
Because
I get so many
Yeah.
suckers,
Uh.
so many suckers coming up. I mean, they're looking for more territory.
Are you, and are these grafted onto some kind of rootstock?
I don't know, because they were there when I lived there.
Oh, you sure they're not flowering quinces? Flowering quinces are sucker like mad.
Yeah, they do.
No.
Well, and
These aren't, these aren't the canamelis, no. No, they like, they produce,
are they thorny?
no,
No,
Okay. Interesting.
I've got them cut up all over the place.
Do they produce very much?
Well, that's hard to say. They used to, we ended up, because they were right next to junipers, and juniper is an alternate host for the pear trellis rust. So I didn't want to take out the pears, didn't want to take out the quince, so ended up taking out huge amount of junipers.
Mhm.
So this is the third year, so, I'm still getting rust, stuff on the leaves that are impacting production.
Interesting. Well, yeah, and maybe it's a seed, variety that is suffering. That's a good question. I have not seen something that produces what I would recognize as a tree fruit, Quince tree fruit, that does that.
Oh, really? Oh, gosh, how
Yeah.
interesting. Go
Yeah.
to my place.
You must have a novel variety.
That's
I wish I
possible.
knew. I wish I knew
To go back to the disease issue for a minute. The, most of what I see on Quince, this stuff I see on pears. I will see the occasional pear slug, I will see skeletonized leaves, not a lot, but some. By the end of the summer, the leaves look pretty ratty on most of my quince. But then I don't spray. I mean, I don't do anything special to my trees. So, I have, and they survive Pseudomonas. I had one that just looked like a dog's dinner for its first 2 years in the ground. But then I've had that happen to a pear too. And I just waited it out. And now I'm on year 3 on both that orchis that was having such a terrible time with Pseudomonas and my little quince that was having the same problem. And both of them look great this year. So,
Drier and hotter.
yeah, I guess. Well, all this has been a pretty cool summer so far. Dry, but cool. So I don't know.
It's so hard to keep track, the weather throws in all these variables
All
from
right.
year to year.
Yeah. But I mean, really, if I can give you something to take away from tonight's conversation, I would encourage you to work with the fruit, even though it's kind of hard to figure out how do you do it and not, cut yourself. It's worth it. It is worth it to work with this fruit because of its storage capacity, because of the fragrance, because of the nutritive qualities of the fruit, because the tree is relatively easy care. And there's just, in my mind, just because you can't eat it fresh doesn't mean you shouldn't be growing and eating it. So.
It's a beautiful fruit. It's very sensual.
Yeah.
Why do you think you weren't able to successfully get your membrio to harden or whatever?
I found it was grainy. And I wanted it to be really, yeah, most membrio I've had is just really smooth and kind of succulent and soft and sexy, like that. My membrio, it was, yeah, grainy. And there are sometimes when you're working with quince where you will find grainy patches.
Vitamix.
I bet, yeah, I bet.
So what
no,
variety were you using?
I don't even remember. I think it was something that I bought before, when I was still working at Burnt Ridge and Michael was growing quince. I think I took some home
Uh-huh.
and tried to make the embryo out of it, and it was just like,
Yeah,
We also made a mostarda, which is an Italian candied mustard based
Yes.
fruit. And it cooked for 7 days in its own liquid. And mustard oil is usually a component which is very hard to get. And so we just used powdered mustard, but you end up with this crazy candied stuff that has the mustard and it has the quince flavor and it's intensely sweet. And, it would be something that you could use just as with some cheese or with some sausage or, something that's also, again, very strongly flavored as a compliment, and chutney too, is another place that I've seen a lot of people
You
use
can
quince.
buy a jar of it in a store. You might find it at some place like the
World Market.
World Market or someplace like that. I bought a jar of it. And reading the recipe, I thought, okay, this is gonna be a little bit long, so I bought a jar. But it has a unique flavor, and yeah, you do use the powdered
A jar of what?
must.
Mustard.
Yeah, the whole thing, it's a combo, or or chutney, it's so, yeah, it's quite interesting. Okay, it does contain cyanide, but you'd have to eat a lot.
Yeah, I think that's true of most things. You have to eat a
Same thing
lot.
with the apple, yeah, the seeds contain nitrate, are common in the seeds of the rose family. And the stomach enzymes and stomach acid, or both, cause some of the nitrates to be hydrolyzed, I'm not saying that,
Hydrolyzed.
and produce hydrogen cyanide, which is a volatile gas. The seeds are only toxic if it's eaten in large quantities, and then some places say, well, you might not eat them, but but you're not gonna kill
There's
yourself.
a barrel full of seed, a barrel full of quince seed.
Yeah, I wouldn't eat them like sunflowers. That's-
No. Well, usually, you just cook the seeds and you don't eat them.
Correct.
So you just get whatever juice, yeah,
Yeah.
right, the pectin,
Yeah.
you can protect it.
You want to get the pectin,
Yeah.
it's probably from the outside stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
what's the benefit?
I think that's been sort of a myth for a long time, it's like the, apricot seeds. If you use them in canning, they give an extra flavor to your canned goods, but they also contain that if you have to cook them to neutralize that, and you only use like one seed for the whole
Yes.
jar, so you're getting very, very little, if any. And it's kind of nice, if you get the book, Saving the Seasons, he actually sent the seeds away to a lab to have them tested. And he found out that after they were cooked or baked or whatever, they no longer are.
It's like a lot of things change.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of nice to have somebody actually send them off to a lab.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Let's-
and it's kind of too bad because we don't use all the parts we could use.
Right, yes, yeah, I don't throw anything away when I'm using my pen.
I did already.
At all.
Yeah, another slide.
Oh, that's just the last.
So you got me written down.
This is $20.
Yep. That was great.
All right, y'all.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we want you to come back and talk about pluots.
The thing about pluots, which really are my favorite,
They're delicious.
is that I have this experience when it comes to growing them. Because I'm just not, our area is just not hot enough.
We've also got a 10-pound.
And they write extraordinarily late, considering that they have such profound Asian plum parentage. You think they would write it, and they don't. So, I mean, like, one of these days, if I ever had an opportunity to have a greenhouse, I would grow pluots. I would grow a late ripening Asian plum, like emerald, golden nectar, or one of those really, really late ones, and use that to pollinize the pluots. Because that's how you pollinize pluots, is you share pollen with an Asian plum that throws pollen, because almost all the pluots, if they have any viable pollen at all, it's not very much. And you really need an Asian plum to do the job.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So if we come down a rain tree, when's the time to buy the trees and plant them?
So you pre-order I'm not sure if the quince are in pre-order status or not. I think they are. And then you can either plan to come pick them up after the middle of February,
Okay,
and save on shipping, or have them shipped out, to you. But, if you really want the pick of the litter as far as varieties go,
yeah,
now is a good time to pre-order.
would be a good one to start with.
I would go with, Van Diemen or Smyrna.
Okay,
I mean, or the Aromatnaya. I'm the one who writes the descriptions
okay.
on all that stuff.
That's pretty amazing.
So,
Read those things.
yeah, right?
I would-
I love it. I
Well, you're
get
like
to
a
go
secret.
down little
I
rabbit
can
holes all
make
the
a
time.
decision here,
But anything that says it's got Russian parentage
yeah. Okay,
is almost always a good bet for here.
Okay.
Anything that says it's from Turkey or, you know, a hot region, or if it says will not fully ripen in the Pacific Northwest, you know, I put that in there for a reason. So don't get those.
okay.
And we have the Arabanaya or whatever it is,
Yeah,
and it's great. It does just really wonderfully.
Urban man.
Aromatnaya.
It's like aroma with Naya at the end.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah,
It's a great one.
yeah, and it's a
It's-
Russian parentage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura, again, thank you very much. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. I can't wait to watch the recording and pieces, parts that I missed.
So, yeah, I mean, and I'll just mention,